The Duke of Ashmore set the bank draft on the parsonage table and turned it so the figure faced the old man across the wood. "That is for your daughter's hand," he said. "If the sum offends you by being too small, name a larger, and it will be written before I leave this room." Jonas Combe did not so much as glance at the paper. He looked instead at the Duke, at the mud drying on his boots, at the great coat steaming faintly by the little fire, at the ringed hand resting on the table like a hand that had never in 38 years been refused anything. Then he folded his own fingers over a worn book and said quite gently, "She needs a good man, not a rich one." The clock on the mantel ticked 11 times before Lawrence trusted himself to answer. Beyond the window a hen was complaining about something. The parlour smelled of tallow and apples and damp plaster, and there was a bucket in the corner catching the ceiling. He had been refused things in his life: a horse he wanted at the autumn sales, a bill in the Lords, a fever's mercy. The January his elder brother died and left him a title he had never expected to carry. But he had not been refused a wife, and never by a country parson with a darn in his elbow, and it took him a moment to understand that the man had meant it kindly. That, somehow, was the worst part. "You mistake my meaning, sir," he said. "There would be a settlement upon her. Upon you also. This living is worth £92 a year, and the vestry roof lets in the weather." Combe smiled without any triumph in it at all. "You have done your reading, your grace. You have only read the wrong page. Then instruct me." "I have. She needs a good man." The old man rose, and his knees cracked, and he did not apologize for them. "You are welcome to the tea, though it is poor tea." Lawrence left the draft lying where it was. It seemed to him, walking out into the raw March light, that leaving it there was an argument, and that he was winning it. He was still telling himself so when he came round the corner of the house and found her. She was at the pump with her sleeves turned back to the elbow, and her forearms red to the wrist, working the handle over a basin of linen. The wind had pulled half her hair loose, and she had not troubled to fix it. She looked up. She did not curtsy the way the women in town curtsied, with the small paw afterwards that invited a man to keep looking. She simply straightened, pushed the hair off her brow with the back of a wet wrist, and waited. "Miss Combe." "Your Grace." Her eyes went past him to the parlour window and came back, and something in her face closed like a door. "You have been offering my father money. I have been offering your father a fortune. For me." "For the honour of your hand," said Lawrence, who had learned that phrase from his own father, and had never once heard how it sounded until this minute. Lavinia Combe dried her hands on her apron. She was not a beauty in any way the season would have recognized. Her mouth was too wide and her chin too decided, and there was a smudge of soot along her jaw from somebody else's chimney. But she looked at him the way a person looks at a horse they are thinking of buying, and no one had looked at Lawrence in that fashion in the whole of his life. "You have brought a great deal of money into a house that has none," she said. "That was either very kind or very cruel, and I cannot yet tell which." "It was neither. It was an offer, yes." She lifted the basin against her hip. "That is what troubles me. He should have gone." He had a horse waiting and 40 miles of road and a house with 11 unused bedrooms at the end of it. Instead he heard himself say, "Your father tells me you require a good man. Tell me what he means by it, and I will have the article by Friday." And she laughed, not cruelly. The way one laughs at a boy who has offered to fetch the moon down with a ladder. The sound went through him like cold water. "He means a man who is good when it is inconvenient," she said. "Anyone can be good at Christmas, your Grace." Widow Nance has no coal and her chimney draws the smoke back into the room, and she will not ask, because asking is the last thing she owns. That is what he means. She shifted the basin to her other hip. "Good day." He rode home in a temper he could not put a name to. On the Tuesday he sent a wagon of coal down to Winterslade parish, and a purse of 30 guineas along with it, and instructed his steward to see that both were delivered with the compliments of the Duke of Ashmore. On the Friday the purse came back. Came by the carrier, wrapped in brown paper, the seal unbroken, with a single sheet folded round in a small upright hand. "The coal is gone already, and Widow Nance's room is warm, and she says God bless you, which I am charged to pass on exactly. I have kept back nothing. The money I return, because the coal will warm her, and the money would only have warmed you." He read it standing in the great hall at Ashmore, with the light coming down through 40 feet of window onto black and white marble, and he read it a second time, and then he sat down upon the stairs like a man struck somewhere that does not show. Nobody had told him a plain truth in 11 years. He had begun to suspect that plain truth did not exist below a certain income. He was at the parsonage gate by Monday. She was in the churchyard, of all places, with a barrow and a sickle, cutting back the nettles that had swallowed the poor graves along the north wall, where the markers were only wood. She glanced at him and went on cutting. "You have come to argue about the purse." "I have come," said Lawrence, "to be instructed." That stopped the sickle. "Your Grace, you said a man is good when it is inconvenient. I find that I do not know how it is done. I was not raised to it. It cost him more than the 30 guineas to say it, and he said it looking straight at her, because he was not a coward, whatever else he was. They tell me I am a hard landlord and a harder master, and I have never much minded the telling. I mind it now. Teach me the trick of it." Lavinia Combe stood among the nettles with the sickle in her hand and studied him for what felt to him like a quarter of an hour. Then she reached behind her, took up the bucket standing against the wall and held it out. "The pump is by the vestry," she said. "It wants 2 journeys to fill the trough, and I would rather not stop cutting." He looked at the bucket. It was a common wooden thing with an iron hoop and a rope handle worn shiny with use, and he was the 9th Duke of Ashmore, and there were men in London who had waited 3 weeks for 10 minutes of his time. He took the bucket. The spring turned wet, and the Duke of Ashmore came to Winterslade 11 times before Whitsun. He mended nothing well at first. He put a ladder through the vestry window and had to pay the glazier out of his own pocket and be laughed at by 2 farmers, and he found, to his considerable astonishment, that being laughed at did not kill him. He carried thatch. He held a lamb while Lavinia's father set its leg. He sat 3 hours in Widow Nance's smoke-blackened room and let her tell him about her husband, who had died at sea in a year Lawrence had spent at Oxford, and he never once looked at his watch, because he had left it at home on purpose. And always Lavinia was somewhere near, sleeves turned back, saying very little and seeing everything. "You are quieter than you were," she said one evening at the gate, when the light had gone violet over the hop poles. "There is less to say when one is not buying anything." Yes, she was looking at his hands, which had blistered and hardened and blistered again. "Your Grace, why do you keep coming?" Truthfully, the truthful answer had arrived some weeks before, and he had been carrying it about like a stone in his boot. He turned it over now and gave it to her. "Because when I am here I am a man," he said, "and when I am at Ashmore I am only a fortune with a title tied to it. I did not know the difference existed until your father declined to sell you to me." She was still. A moth went by between them. "That is a great deal better than the bank draft," she said at last, and her voice was not quite steady, and she went inside without another word. Lawrence stood at the gate in the dark for some time, grinning like a fool at a hedge. The blow came on the last Thursday in May. He rode down and found the parsonage door shut against him. She came out to the gate and did not open it. In her hand was a paper he knew before he could read it, because he had seen 500 like it, a notice to quit, engrossed in a clerk's careful hand, and at the foot of it, pressed into red wax, the Wyvern and 3 sheaves of Ashmore. "Sedge Row," she said, 9 cottages, 14 days. "That is not mine. It is your seal." "It is not my order." He was off the horse. "Lavinia, it is your seal, your Grace." Her chin came up and her eyes were bright and hard, and she did not let one tear fall, which he found he could hardly bear. "Ellen Pike has 3 little ones and a husband coughing his lungs out, and they are to be on the road by the 10th of June. And you have been in my father's churchyard all spring, carrying buckets, being good where I could see it." She pushed the paper through the bars at him. "Take it. It is addressed to you as much as to her." She went in. He stood with the notice in his hand and the rain beginning, and understood at last, and completely, what it was to be judged on the whole of what one is rather than on the pleasant part of it. His steward's name was Pargeter. He had held the office 9 years, and was praised everywhere for his efficiency, and Lawrence had signed what was put before him at Michaelmas and Lady Day for 11 years without once reading past the totals, and had thought himself a busy man rather than a lazy one. Rent day at the estate office fell on the 1st of June. The whole parish came, as it always came, hats in hands, in a line that reached from the door to the horse block. The Duke of Ashmore came too, which had not happened in living memory. He walked past the line and in at the door and took the ledger off the desk before Pargeter had finished rising, and he read it standing in front of them all, page after page, while the clock ticked and nobody breathed. The common at Sedge Row enclosed. Rents raised a third in 4 years. Arrears charged at interest. 9 families to be turned out so the ground might be laid to grass for sheep, with a note in the margin observing that the cottages were old and their loss would not be felt. Whose hand is this? Yours, your grace. Pargetter's voice was smooth as butter in a warm dish. By your authority. Entirely regular, yes, said Lawrence. That is the part I mean to answer for. He tore the notices across all 9 and let the pieces fall on the desk. He struck out the arrears of every tenant in the book and initialed it and set the date beside it, so there could be no arguing afterwards. He restored the common at Sedge Row to the parish in perpetuity and said so aloud twice, that 40 witnesses might carry it home. Then he dismissed his steward before the whole assembly, in a level voice. Without one word a woman need have left the room to avoid hearing, and had the books carried out to the carriage for a stranger's inspection. What became of Pargeter afterwards was the business of lawyers and no ornament to the day. Then Lawrence stood on the step before his tenants, and said the hardest thing, which was that the fault had been his own, that a man who does not read what he signs has signed it nonetheless, and that he would be reading everything hereafter. Nobody cheered. Country people do not cheer, they wait and see. But an old man at the back put his hat slowly back on his head, which is a different thing, and Lawrence rode away with his ears burning and his chest oddly light. He did not go to the parsonage that day, nor the next. It seemed to him that arriving to be thanked would spoil the only decent thing he had ever done. On the Sunday he sat at the back of Winterslade Church, and afterwards walked up to the parsonage with nothing in his hands at all. No draft, no purse, no wagon. Jonas Combe met him in the parlour doorway. I have brought you nothing, Lawrence said. I have not a shilling about me, and I have laid out a great deal of money this week that I shall miss. I own that I began this to win an argument. I do not know at what hour it stopped being an argument, but it stopped. He drew breath. I am not a good man, sir. I am a man who has lately been shown the road to it and would rather not lose sight of it. That is all I have to offer your daughter, and it is offered without any settlement whatsoever. The old parson looked at him a long moment. The bucket still stood in the corner, and the ceiling above it had been mended, badly, by a duke. Well, said Jonas Combe, then you had better ask her yourself and not me. That is rather the point I was making in March. She was at the gate. She had been at the gate, Lawrence suspected, for some little while. He came down the path and stopped in front of her, and found that all the elegant sentences had gone out of his head, which was as well, because she would not have wanted them. Lavinia, he said, I have nothing to lay on your table. No, she said. You have carried water for 6 weeks and torn up 9 notices and told 40 men to their faces that you were in the wrong. Her voice went. She put out her hand and he took it, blistered palm to blistered palm, and neither of them let go. My father is a clever old man. He thought you might be worth the making. And you? I knew it the day the purse came back and you did not send it a second time. She laughed, and this time it was not the laugh for boys with ladders. Ask me, your grace. It is inconvenient out here, and the midges are dreadful, and you may as well be good at it. He asked her at the parsonage gate, bareheaded, with the hop poles going violet behind him. They were married in the small church in September, the vestry roof sound at last, and Widow Nance in the second pew in a bonnet the Duchess had trimmed herself. Ellen Pike's family kept their cottage, and the common at Sedge Row is common still. The bucket went to Ashmore. Lawrence would not have it thrown away. It stands in the corner of the great hall to this day, on that black and white marble, beneath 40 feet of window, and when visitors ask about it the Duke tells them it is the most expensive thing in the house.